Madam President, the terms of the loan are deemed very, very generous, and we must be grateful for the benevolence and generosity of the multilateral organizations who are coming to our rescue to ensure that we are able to manage the socio-economic impact of COVID in our country. When we speak of terms, Madam President, we're talking about a 40-year loan with a grace period of 10 years on both principal and interest. I say both principal and interest because no mention was made in the resolution to suggest that interest will be charged during the grace period and that interest would be required to be paid. Madam President, it doesn't get better than this. The applicable interest rates and service charge are also extremely generous. 1% commencing after 1% interest, commencing after the 10-year moratorium, effective 15th May 2041, and 2% from year 41, and of course a service charge of 0.75%. The leader of government business shared with this House earlier today the fiscal predicament of the state. Indeed, Madam President, the Prime Minister has spared no time in his ongoing articulation of the same. So I believe as a country we have a pretty good idea as to what we are dealing with, and whatever we don't hear, I believe there's a sense where we are feeling and we are seeing for ourselves. So the situations are dire. The consequences of COVID-19 on small states like ours have been highlighted in many publications. The internet is replete with articles and reference and publications, and I want to focus on one such publication by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in May 2020, which is entitled "The COVID-19 Pandemic Puts Small Island Developing Economies in Dire Straits." So if you permit me, Madam President, I'll just read briefly just a section of this, which would put the country's predicament into proper perspective.
Leave is granted.
Thank you, Madam President. In that article, it is mentioned that COVID-19 is posing significant health and economic risk to small island developing economies, given the small economic base, high degree of openness, and extreme dependence on economic performance of a few developed countries. The article goes on to say, Madam President, amid sharp falls in tourism revenues and remittances, small island economies are likely to experience the most pronounced contraction, further exacerbating their vulnerability to economic and climate shocks. Disproportionately high debt servicing burdens of many small island economies will weaken the external balance, potentially increasing the likelihood of debt faults. Many small island economies highly dependent on food imports face the added challenge of ensuring food security during the health and economic crisis. Finally, Madam President, the pandemic response will constrain the fiscal space of small island developing economies and exacerbate their vulnerabilities to natural disasters brought about by climate change. Madam President, this is consistent with our country's current economic reality. The economic fundamentals of St. Lucia have taken a razor-sharp dive, a razor-sharp nosedive, and the consequential impact socially is also dire. Every business sector has been impacted, thus the livelihood of many of our citizens have been similarly impacted. Many of them are on the breadline, and we've discussed this here today, we've discussed in other sittings, Madam President, and we've said a lot of them are in despair, and that is the reality, they are in despair. In the absence of economic and social safety nets, it is accepted that the government, out of grave necessity, must find ways to address the social and economic needs of the country. It is a necessity, the government has no choice. Indeed, that is the government's mandate, to ensure that it addresses the socio-economic landscape of the country. Madam President, having said this, the only way is for borrowing because we do not have the safety nets. We do not have funds set aside to assist. We do not have monies in the sinking fund. We do not have any significant programs to provide that level of safety net that is so desperately required. So the borrowing is inevitable. It is inevitable. So I have no fundamental issue with the resolution before us, Madam President.